It's all critically important, and it's important that you understand what's really happening rather than just the spin. So joining me now is someone who's covered this extensively, Sky's political contributor, Chris Uhlmann. Well, let's start with that warning today from AEMO about the impending retirement of Eraring. We know it was set to close under the former Liberal, Matt Keane, when he was Minister in New South Wales. Of course, he's now the grand poobah for Labor's energy schemes federally. I suspect he will still want it to close. Labor's Chris Minns, though, said today, I've extended it once. If I have to, I'll extend it again. Here's what the boss of AEMO, Daniel Westerman, had to say this morning.
You'll hear the name synchronous condensers. These are big spinning machines on the grid that really keep a stable heartbeat, and they need to be in place before the closure of major coal-fired power stations. These coal plants are just getting old. They are going to retire. If they're not withdrawn, they're going to break, and we need to be ready for that.
All right, how many warnings, Chris, do we need before we wake up?
Yeah, well, look, the big spinning wheels is what he's talking about, Peter, and the big spinning wheels inside a steam-driven turbine are what we see at the heart of a coal-fired power plant. So these system stability services that we once used to get as a byproduct of generating power now have to be bought, or we have to keep the ones that we've got. Otherwise, the wind and solar dominant grid will simply fall over. It doesn't provide the heartbeat of the system that Westerman was talking about there. And of course, this comes with an extra cost, and you need to add that extra cost on top of the transmission lines extra cost, and the top of the batteries extra cost, and the top of the everything else that's needed to prop up this system cost, which is why the system that's being built and the total system cost that we'll end up with is absolutely massive. And the only thing you need to do is to look at your energy bill, and you'll see why the government is putting $6.8 billion worth of your taxpayers' dollars into trying to stop you seeing the real pain of this transition.
I scream at the TV every time I hear people say Labor ministers were out there on this very point. You know, the system was breaking down. These coal-fired power stations were at their end of life. They had to be retired. This is the line. They were only at end of life. They only required retirement because we were not replacing them. We were not upgrading them to the new helium or modern systems that we're seeing around the world. But we also made it so uneconomic in policy terms. We forced this upon the industry.
Yeah, well, we made it politically impossible to build coal-fired power plants, and all people need to do again is look at their experience. The system worked perfectly well when it was dominated by coal-fired power, so there's nothing wrong with coal-fired power. It generates electricity very well, and it generates it extremely cheaply, comparative to almost everything else in the marketplace. And when you compare it to wind and solar, it is cheaper than wind and solar because it delivers an entire electricity system, and wind and solar simply don't, not without a huge life support system. So, yes, these things work. They work well. Of course, they're building huge numbers of them in China, and that's where they get the cheap electricity from, which they make wind turbines and electric vehicles with, and they send them back to us, and solar panels.
And have us over a barrel in manufacturing terms more broadly. You know, I really thought after COVID, Chris, when we were all stuck here, we only had one little mum and dad shop making face masks left in Australia. We had to send the Defence Force to staff their operation, to scale up. We couldn't import enough of basically anything from overseas. I really thought we were going to wake up to this fact, but we're not anywhere near that.
No, well, look at what's happened economically. All we've done is really we have shifted the point of production. Carbon emissions go up every single year. The world is not doing net zero. What the world is doing is offshoring manufacturing. It offshored that manufacturing to China. China now burns 57% of the world's coal, and with that energy, what has it got? A third of the world's manufacturing. We have offshored energy to China, and with it, we've offshored the production of things that matter to us to China. Genius.
Yeah, and just on this point, when we are talking about, say, the blue-collar economy, as we are generally with manufacturing, that's one thing. And you can say, well, that ship sailed, it's too hard necessarily to get that back. But we are also about to not even onshore and then lose. We're not even going to get ourselves in the new economy, the tech economy, the big information, the big data economy, because that also requires gargantuan amounts of power, and we will not be able to supply that. So we'll lose in the old style technology world, and we're going to lose in the new style technology world as well. So, you know, what are we going to be? An economy of nail bars and baristas? I mean, is that what Australia's going to have to pay for its future? I just can't see how we pay our way in the world.
Yeah, now bars and baristas and people who sell very expensive houses to each other is pretty much what our economy will be, because it's not going to be much of anything else when you have a ridiculously high electricity price, because in the last century we had high wages, we had very low power costs. We can't be a high power cost country in Australia. And by the way, all of the stuff and all of the modelling that we've seen so far, Peter, and a lot of it's very wrong already, but isn't based on having massive growth in artificial intelligence. If we get that, then you have to multiply again all of the wind and solar panels by 4 or 5 more times to try and generate the electricity that you'll need. And even then, it won't function because it needs to be backed up by something that you can deliver on demand. Artificial intelligence demands a 24/7 power supply. Wind, solar and batteries do not deliver it on their own.
Let's just go quickly. I want to pay credit to the Australian newspaper today. They had a terrific feature on the small business and medium-sized business face of power bills. We know what it is like for all of us in our households, but what's happening there to our employment sector, and half of all Australians have a job in small business, is terrifying. Here's a bit of what some people had to say.
Expecting another 40 to 50% increase in the upcoming negotiations. So it's definitely impacted my business quite severely.
We have 30 solar panels on our roof, and even that isn't enough to offset the near 20% increase in electricity bills.
We use a lot of electricity, being a bakery and patisserie, and it's just a massive cost that we have to incur, and the prices are just increasing quite dramatically.
Makes it hard to make investment decisions for the future, hard to invest in more employees when we have uncertainty around our costs, and it's making our product more expensive to the end user.
Well, anyone their business confidence is low, profitability is, in the toilet, and inflation's up, Chris.
Peter, one thing that's true about this is any time that you now ask Chris Bowen or anyone else in government to name a date at which energy prices will fall. That was always the promise. Now, I don't care if it's 2025, 2026, 2027. Tell us when electricity prices will fall under the system that you are constructing. And they have no confidence in doing that because they know that they are not coming down. And this is the massive lie at the heart of all of this stuff. They know now that that is not going to happen, not any time in the near future, and they refuse to admit that that's the case. They're trying to bandage up the pain by putting taxpayers' dollars back into your electricity bill. And let's not be under any illusion as to what's happening. We are conducting surgery on the brain of the nation and on the heart of the nation. We are building this system while we are using it, and it is inadequate for its purpose. It will be massively expensive and it will be unreliable. And without that system, this nation does not function.
Let's go to the massive announcement today by the acting Prime Minister, the Defence Minister, of course, Richard Marles. He has integrated 3 separate branches in the Defence Department into a new Defence Delivery Agency. This reminds me, when I worked in the Howard era for the Defence Minister, of the old procurement arm that they established then, that was scrapped many years later when it didn't work. We know there's been the blowouts, the delays and all the procurement issues. We talk about them most nights. Do you think this could help, or is this more window dressing and spin?
And Peter, now you've been around for a long time too, and you will know the old maxim in bureaucracy is when in doubt, reorganise, right? So that's what we're seeing again now. Now, to my way of counting, and there was something before that, but back in 2005, because we thought that Defence wasn't delivering on procurement, we set up a prescribed agency, which you call the Defence Material Organisation. Yep, we took it out of Defence and put it on its own. And guess what? 2015, we decided that wasn't working, and so then we had the capability sustainment. I can't remember the acronym now, but it's the one we're now replacing. So that's 2015, 10 years later. 2025, 10 years later, we are now setting up what? A standalone agency, pretty much, that's going to report directly to the Minister. Now, I think that all this tells you that there is some deep systemic issue inside the Department of Defence that does need to be addressed, and just rearranging the deck chairs again, that won't work. Look, I know that Richard Marles is in a difficult circumstance. He's got to try and do something to make Defence do its job, but there is a deeper structural issue inside Defence that needs to be addressed.
I was working for that Defence Minister 20 years ago now when the DMO came in, and I feel like we're going back to the future there. We'll leave it there.
Yep.
Chris, thank you.